Donald Trump's vice presidential pick, J.D. Vance, made a joke at the National Conservative Conference in D.C. a few weeks ago. This joke did not go down very well amongst British progressives, but let's have a listen.
One of the big dangers in the world, of course, is nuclear proliferation. And I was talking about, what is the first truly Islamist country that will get a nuclear weapon? And we were like, maybe it's Iran, maybe Pakistan already kind of counts. And then we sort of finally decided maybe it's actually the UK, since Labour just took over.
J.D. Vance's joke that Britain might become the first Islamist country to acquire nuclear arms is of course absurd. But is it becoming a more Islamist country, or is something else at play? One thing's for sure is that Britain is becoming an increasingly segregated country, and recent events certainly suggest so. Like what happened at Manchester Airport, or before that in Harehills, Yorkshire. Last week, also, Islamist leader Anjem Choudary has been sentenced to life in prison. And at the beginning of the month, there were several MPs elected to Parliament on the Muslim sectarian ticket. Now, if all of this has happened in the past year, that would be a cause of concern. This has all happened in July. Now, these incidences are not immediately related. There also are different phenomena at play in each case. There's maybe some overlap, but they're not necessarily the same thing. It's nuanced, and I want to get into that nuance. So we're going to have a closer look at each of those things in this video. But before we go into the Manchester Airport incident, I ask, if you want to support the show, all you have to do is press subscribe. If you press subscribe, I can explore more difficult taboo topics like this one, and we can invite more brilliant guests on as well. On the 24th of July, videos went viral on the internet showing an incident that had happened the day prior at Manchester Airport. If you haven't seen that video, let's watch it now together.
Oh shit! Move up!
It's a shocking video because it doesn't appear as if the suspect on the ground is a threat to anyone, especially not the police officer. Now let's look at how events unfolded from there. Police published a statement on the 24th of July confirming that 4 men had been arrested, 1 female police officer had suffered a broken nose, and another had been suspended. There's not much more context than that, except that of course it's in an airport, a high security area. The initial video, which you've seen, was circulated on the 24th of July and now has been watched tens of millions of times. By the 25th of July, this was a national story with a whole spectrum of opinions, ranging from The Guardian publishing a headline saying that this was a racist attack, and on the other side, politicians such as Lee Anderson from Reform UK backing the police completely. It is, of course, possible that this was a racist attack. It's also possible that this was a terrorist attack. It could have been anything in between. We do not know. And at this point, we don't have any context for the video. By this point, the victim narrative around this whole incident took momentum, with lawyer of 2 of those arrested, Ahmed Yaqub, going and doing media.
It was something that hasn't been seen before, such police brutality.
Now, by the night of the 25th, a group of men, some of whom were masked, went to Rochdale Police Station to protest. Showing solidarity with their fellow Muslims who had been arrested in the incident, they vandalized the police station and were recorded chanting Allah Akbar, amongst other things.
But tomorrow I'll tell you boys, if we don't get justice, these motherfuckers are gonna get it.
Now, American viewers might not know or appreciate this, but we have seen protests outside of Rochdale Police Station before. Back in 2021, we saw protests against the grooming gangs, which had been covered up by police, media, as well as politicians. Grooming gangs had been raping, drugging, and in some cases, killing young British white girls, specifically because of their race. The relevance here is that this is a region of Britain with strong tensions between different groups. But back to the Manchester Airport incident. Just to remind you at home, at this point, although we had no context for the video from Manchester Airport, it has now escalated to religious tribalism. The victims, or suspects, depending on which side you land on this, were released on bail. On the 26th of July, things escalated again when the lawyer for the suspect who'd been kicked in the head went on LBC News and claimed it had been an assassination attempt.
Attempted assassination, the joint enterprise assassination of the young boys by the police officers.
This is, of course, a complex issue, and by this time we learned that one member of the family of the suspects is himself in the police force. On the 27th of July, the family of the suspects asked for a de-escalation in the protests. But the whole story took a huge turn on the 28th of July when Manchester Evening News released this video to show the context that was missing from that first video. In this second video, we see that the two suspects had in fact assaulted the police officers in Manchester Airport, and they'd assaulted them before being tasered to the ground, and that's where the first video began. Now, I note at time of recording, we still don't know what added context there might be. Maybe there'll be another video preceding this second video to enlighten us even further. And even with this new footage, it might still be argued that the kick to the head of the suspect prone on the floor could still have been excessive. But what we do know is upon release of this second video, the lawyer Ahmed Yaqub quit. We don't know the whole incident and there's an investigation underway. But what we did see was that there are great tensions between different communities in that region. We have seen similar tensions across the country. Only the week prior to this, in Harehills, Yorkshire, we saw huge riots. What happened in Harehills? Well, on the 18th of July, child services came to take some children away from a Roma family. What began in the small Roma community, of which the 2021 census reports there were only 494 people, soon escalated and thousands of people were rioting and burning Harehills down to the ground. The scenes were so shocking and violent that the police themselves were seen withdrawing.
Oh my God, no way, no way! No way! Look at the people, oh my day! Oh my day, that's so important. Oh my day, no way, no way!
Whether or not you agree that the child should or should not have been taken away by child services, the reaction, I'm sure you'll agree, was not appropriate. Now, of course, we know not everyone involved was Muslim. It is also, of course, highly unlikely that those Muslims involved would consider this a cause for celebration and say God is good. But we do know that some part of the mainly Muslim community did feel this way. These extremists might be a small minority. What's happened since? Well, it is also a contentious issue with a whole gamut of different opinions on what happened. What we do know is that at least 20 people have been arrested. What does this have in common with Manchester? Well, regardless of what you think about the triggering incidents in both cases, what we see is a quick escalation upon tribal lines and resorting to violence. Now, of course, JD Vance joked that we were an Islamist country. These don't appear to be Islamist, even if there are Islamist elements on the fringes. There is an important story regards Islamism that happened this month in the UK. Anjem Choudary is facing life in jail after being found guilty of directing terrorism. He was found guilty at Woolwich Crown Court of directing a terrorist organisation and encouraging support of a prescribed organisation. The terrorist organisation was called Al-Muhajiron. Choudary convicted of having caretaker role. Choudary even boasted that he had been the #1 radicalizer in Britain. Choudary had been linked to several terrorists, including the Lee Rigby murderer and the leader of the London Bridge terror attacks. He was previously sentenced to 5 years in prison for his support of ISIS, but only served 2. What concerns me most about Chowdary's latest sentence, albeit a life sentence, is why has it taken this long to come through? Can we be sure he'll actually serve it? And why should we, the taxpayer, pay for it? Shouldn't we send him home to Canada, where he's from? The story of Anjem Choudary tells us that Islamism is, of course, a very serious threat in Britain. How widespread that threat is, however, is another issue. What is abundantly clear after what happened in both Manchester and Harehills is that Britain is becoming increasingly segregated. What better illustration of that than the last general election, where 4 independents were elected to Parliament on sectarian lines. By sectarian, what I mean is that these 4 MPs were elected because of their religion. This is quite different from the British tradition. One of those 4 MPs, Shaukat Adan, was the local leader of an Islamist group that was criticized for partnering with extremism. As it emerges, another told a rally there was no difference between Israeli government and ISIS. This all happened in July 2024. What's the greater context? Well, earlier this year, Mike Freer, the Conservative MP, said he would not be standing again in the election because he feared for his life. He felt he narrowly missed the same fate of Sir David Amess, the Conservative MP who was brutally murdered in an Islamist attack in 2021. Speaker of the House, Lindsay Hoyle, earlier this year went against parliamentary protocol because he felt that MPs were in danger because of threats from anti-Israel protesters. What's the wider context of all of this? Well, some years we have up to 700,000 net migrants a year. It is a scale of migration that we cannot possibly hope to integrate and assimilate newcomers. This is the dream of multiculturalism that seems to be failing. Of course, if you come to Britain, you are invited to participate in our history, our tradition, our values, and our legal system. Unfortunately, something quite different has happened. We have now got enclaves of the countries, whole areas which have a completely different culture. They even have a different legal system. We know that there are over 85 Sharia courts in Britain alone. The Henry Jackson Society published some very uncomfortable information earlier this year when they found that 76% of British Muslims, i.e. 3 out of 4 million, did not believe that Hamas had committed murder or rape on October 7th. Henry Jackson Society found that 52% of British Muslims thought that there should be a blasphemy law preventing the publication of images of Muhammad. And of course, we remember the Batley Grammar School teacher is still in hiding. The reality is people are coming to Britain from all over the world and they don't necessarily share the same history, tradition, or values as us. The problem is that instead of integrating and assimilating as had been hoped, new enclaves, new subgroups, new sub-communities are forming, quite separate from the rest of society. And at a rate of 700,000 migrants a year net, how can we possibly hope to integrate these people? Whether or not there's Islamism, that is an issue, but it might be separate from this bigger issue that we have all types of people who are no longer in community with each other. We've got to have serious conversations about how to live together in peace and harmony. And if we can't articulate and put our fingers on exactly what's going on, we'll have no hope of getting there. Mass migration is not unique to Britain. Of course, in America, under the Biden administration, there has been over 10 million illegal immigrants. It is happening across Europe. It is happening across the West. I'm sure everyone will agree we don't want to see more tribal violence. So let's put our minds together to try and work out exactly what is going on. Thank you for watching the Winston Marshall Show. We take a deeper dive into Islam with former Muslim Ibn Warraq next on the Winston Marshall Show podcast. If you enjoy what you heard, if you enjoy the show, remember to subscribe. If you subscribe, I can have more great guests and we can explore the topics you want to hear about. But for now, be well.